my man, what's going on? Everything good?
It's amazing what a piece of media can do, both for good and for ill. I was there when Cyberpunk 2077 first released. I was there when I played it on the PS4 Pro, and I was there when it kept crashing on me because, lo and behold, CD Projekt's vision far outweighed their grasp on what was, essentially, aging, outdated hardware. Okay, there's more to it than that. Suffice to say, 2077 was a rush disaster at launch. Now you may wonder how something originally announced in 2012 or 2013 could be rushed, until you realize that development didn't start until 2016, and the developers, internally, thought the game would aim for a 2022 release and not, 2020, the year where things really hit the fan hard. So yeah, things were really against the game more than for it when you dug outside the hype, and while 2077 is in a drastically better state than it was at launch, the bitter taste in many mouths isn't so easily cleansed to this day. The game's legacy will forever be tied to its initial outing. That is an unfortunate reality considering I eventually bought the PC version and thoroughly loved my time with it then and even now. But among the hype train, during CD Projekt's promotional campaign during the Night City Wire event in June 2020, something curious happened.
There's just one more thing we want to announce, something that we've been working on in secret for a while. We are very excited to announce our partnership with Studio Trigger and Netflix to bring you Cyberpunk Edgerunners, a standalone anime set in the Cyberpunk universe.
Yes, an anime spin-off, surprise for sure. But one I honestly had little faith in, for more than one reason, even with Studio Trigger's involvement. For one, anime adaptations based on non-visual novel video games or game franchises have generally either been run-of-the-mill or, at worst, outright awful full stop. Halo Legends had its moments. Does anybody even remember the Mass Effect anime? Don't get me started on how Akiba's trip was handled. Kantai Collection was average. Fate Stay Night is a visual novel, so, it doesn't really count in my criteria. And there's a broader list ranging in quality that you can find on Wikipedia or My Anime List, some notable, but generally normalizes to a mostly average or subpar result. Was Cyberpunk Edgerunners going to be any different? We didn't know back then, and there wasn't a whole lot to glean about the show for a good couple of years when, finally, they started providing more useful details of what to expect. They showed off the opening, which features This Fire, one of my favorite Franz Ferdinand songs, which did inspire some confidence. They released a teaser, some clips, some trailers, and I gotta admit, it all looked very promising to culminate in a wild time. But I still wasn't entirely convinced just yet. I expected Edgerunners to be a fun ride based on the trailers, albeit one without a whole lot of substance, one would consider cerebral or tangible or intellectually engrossing or whatever fancy smarty pants word or term you wish to apply in this particular instance. All of which my jaded ass is mostly tired of. Sometimes I want mental junk food, and I expected schlock when it came to Edgerunners. And I would have been satisfied if it ended up that way. After all, isn't Trigger known for their over-the-top productions that value style more than any regular substance? Not that it's ever been a bad thing. I like me some schlock, and explosive, high-octane, crazy schlock is what the promotional materials for the show seem to promise. I mean, just look at this. Sign me up! Brainless junk trash is what the doctor ordered, and I gotta say, the initial moments of Edgerunners promised just that. Junk with a side of cyberpunk. David Martinez is just your average street kid in the cruel, unfair world of Night City, California, because all notable dystopias happen in California.
What kind of place is this?
trying to survive the daunting life of being a teenage boy going to Arasaka Academy at the behest of his poor mother's dream of having him someday become a high-ranking corporate suit in a place that values corporations above all else. But like all tragedies set in a post-capitalist hellhole, things go horribly wrong when, at random, David and his mother are caught in between a gang altercation involving heavy machine gun fire and a traffic accident that leaves the mother in critical condition and eventually for dead, leaving David all alone to fend for himself. However, before she died, she harvested a cybernetic implant from a cyberpsycho called the Sandevistan, which allows its user to accelerate their body at superhuman speeds. And after David finds it, he goes to a sketchy Ripper Doc to have it installed in order to have revenge against his rich bullies. Things take a further turn when riding on the metro. He encounters Lucy, a netrunner harvesting shards from people, only to be stopped when she tries to harvest David. He seeks to join her scheme for quick cash, and after harvesting some shards and almost being abducted by an ambulance, leads him down the road to becoming an edgerunner after nearly being killed by Lucy's group consisting of Maine, the leader with heavy cybernetics, Dorio, the buff second-in-command, Kiwi, a jaded veteran netrunner, Pilar, the man who gets killed off early on, and Rebecca, a psychopathic, gun-wielding lolly who is a particular fan favorite of mine. One action-packed, gravity-defying, blood and gore-packed job later, and David is in the crew, working for Eddies and Cyberware. And at first, I thought this was how the show was going to operate from here on. A job of the week type affair, like, say, a cyberpunk version of Cowboy Bebop or something, with David as our emissary into a deeper, darker world of violence, trust issues, death, and destruction. That's the impression you get at first, and one you expect, but alas, episode 6 changes that pretty quick. No, this isn't a job of the week structured anime, nor would it be half as interesting if it was. Granted, I would have been okay with that, but in a daring move, Cyberpunk Edgerunners goes for more ambition than this, primarily due to one aspect I wasn't expecting at all. Edgerunners is inherently a love story when you break it down. Two people come across each other by happenstance, get to know each other, and work together toward an unknown future in a world so bleak and unforgiving as Night City, a place where the human heart gets replaced by more and more chrome each and every day. It's all about the eddies, or nothing at all. But underneath all the bad, to which there's plenty going on in the world of Edgerunners, one wonders if dreams can come true and something truly beautiful can spring forth from such uncertainty. Obstacles are encountered, not least of which involves the cold and calculating fixer known as Faraday, played with scenery-chewing glee by Giancarlo Esposito, Gustavo Fring himself, if you watch the show in English, to which the dub is shockingly top-notch and even bothers fitting in many of the terminologies and slang found in Cyberpunk's world. Sure, there's more to the story, like how David seems to be, and I quote, built different when it comes to how much cyberware he can muster before turning cyber psycho, the corporation's underlying fight for control and power, and all else in between that may or may not receive quite as much development as the primary plot itself. Admittedly, this is sort of Cyberpunk Edgerunners' main drawback, as its subplots have a tendency to come and go at will. Does this hurt the show? Somewhat, but not really to the point of ruin. But at 10 episodes, each of which last about 20 plus minutes in length, characterization is sort of on speed dial here for anyone who isn't David or Lucy. I'm not saying each episode should be these 40 plus minute slogs that pad things out for the sake of hammering in info that may or may not be important for the audience to know, as plenty of lesser quality shows tend to do, but I get the feeling when watching Edgerunners that it could have used an extra episode or two dedicated to characterization of the supporting cast. Maine, for example, has a lot going on in episode 6, what with his struggle of succumbing to cyberpsychosis and clearly having an elaborate backstory that's hinted at, but never expanded upon in a way that's entirely understandable due to lack of time. An extra episode dedicated to him or dedicated to the supporting cast and getting to know them more would have been a welcome addition in a hypothetical scenario, which says much about the strength of the core plot being good enough to blow past issues I may have. Because even if the supporting characters aren't the most in-depth, they're mostly sincere enough, or have some kind of likable or memorable quality to them that helps to make up for their inherent lack of in-depth character development. You may not be able to write a multi-layered essay about all of them, but you sure will have a favorite amongst them is what I'm trying to say. There's also something about Edgerunners' attention to detail in regard to its world. Granted, plenty of the locations, lore, concepts, etc. are lifted almost verbatim from Cyberpunk 2077, sometimes in a copy and paste fashion, as some people have pointed out. After all, a lot of the places the show sets itself in you can literally visit in-game, which is pretty fascinating in of itself. How many video game to insert medium here adaptations actually do this? How many of them seem ashamed of their source material? Cyberpunk Edgerunners is quite possibly the direct opposite of, say, the Halo TV series in this regard, where that show seems to want to shed the game universe off its back in order to do its own thing because Hollywood always believes it can do better. It's refreshing to see something like Edgerunners where it wholeheartedly embraces the fact it's derived from a game universe. Nay, it worships its source material like the Bible, which is refreshing to see. Sure, the actual visual presentation can be hit or miss at times. The show can look pretty damn striking, if not outright beautiful, utilizing a wide range of color choices that match the neon-infested world of Night City and the piles upon piles of retro-futuristic tech and cyberware, with the animation and visual directing matching the intended energy and pace the show goes for at any moment it decides to go into overdrive with its action sequences and set pieces. But then you have moments like... that looked odd. It's not a flawless looking show, and yes, blatant off-modeling and maybe some sketchy animation is abound on this 10-episode one-off adventure, but Edgerunners prevails where plenty of its video game to anime translations fall short. With a clear understanding of its style, iconography, and visual themes, that's something as small as every phone call having its own subtitles appear like they do in the game represents some serious dedication on behalf of the people involved. It's amazing what a piece of media can do, both for good and for ill, to break a reputation or to foster it, and where Cyberpunk 2077 needed to earn back the broken expectations it made to most people, Edgerunners soars right out of the gate, fully ready to show what it has in store, confident in its execution, and triumphant when all is said and done. It could have been a generic tie-in, it could have been less than what it is, and while it could be more, it offers just enough to excite, entertain, and enthrall people with its story about two people and what it means to attain your dreams in a world that seeks to bring you down. Not all endings are happy, and yes, people die along the way, sometimes in ways you never expect. But in this tale of two would-be lovers from two different worlds finding each other, of friendships blooming, enemies made, and violence springing in its wake, David starts off without a dream at all, but through turmoil, through conflict, through love, through Lucy, comes to find his own dream through achieving her dream. And without spoiling it, sometimes the best dreams are found in someone else.
So